Hi, I'm Jerry Portwood, the host of the Queer Love podcast, and I have a really special guest here with me today. And I just want to start by saying, for some people, it might be almost impossible to recall how weird the 1980s were to be gay, let alone the 90s. And luckily, Roddy Bottum, in his new memoir, The Royal We, details what it was like growing up in Los Angeles before moving to San Francisco and forming the band Faith No More. And it's a really gay book. He talks a lot about love, about the losses that he had. And for those who don't know, I just want to say you might remember he wrote Faith No More's first internationally recognized song, We Care a Lot. He also was behind one of the greatest anthems to blowjobs, Be Aggressive. And he revealed he was gay in a 1993 interview with Lance Loud for The Advocate. This was before Rob Halford of Judas Priest had come out, before Michael Stipe of REM or Bob Mould of Husker Du discussed their sexuality in the media. And I remember, and we'll talk more about this, but I remember Kurt Cobain saying he was bisexual and that being a big deal for us at the time. And Roddy was part of all of that. So he went on to form the band The Crickets, which is a Brooklyn based band with JD Sampson and Michael O'Neill. And also, you might remember Imperial Teen, which, if anything, you should remember Yoo-Hoo, which was from the Jawbreaker soundtrack. And then I met Roddy for the first time in 2020 when he formed a band called Man on Man with Joey Holman, his boyfriend, and they released the song Daddy. The video of Daddy went on to be banned by YouTube for violating rules of sex and nudity, and they've now released their first and second albums together. And I don't know, that's a long intro. Sorry, Roddy, but thanks for joining me. And tell me what that was like hearing me say all this jumble of words.
Yeah, it's funny listening about yourself. It really reads like kind of like it has a really crisp narrative to it, like hearing about my life, like just in the early sort of like part of what you were saying, like just like the songs that sort of I was responsible for and did, and then like, yeah, following the course of like, yeah, myself in a snippet is like, wow, look at me. It felt really good. And I like you a lot, Jerry. So it like feels good to hear you like particularly like talk about me and like nice ways like that, and it feels good just in the personal way, but also it's, yeah, I think the scope of like hearing your life in a nutshell is like, whoa, you can't help but sort of specify that, oh yeah, this is like a story.
Well, I heard you talk about this. You've been on your book tour, and I visited when Bitch was interviewing you, and you guys were chatting about the book.
In Boston, yeah.
Yeah, and it obviously it isn't a tidy story, right? And you give it to us in a very blunt and gorgeous at times and difficult at times way. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, you've done a lot. You've written a lot of songs, you've written an opera, you've done a lot of things, but this is your first time you decided to write a book. Why?
Yeah, I don't know why. I think I've always considered myself to be a writer, from an early age. And even when I was young, I remember like coming up with like a pseudonym because I knew Roddy Bottom would be too weird of a name. As I was little, like, and like, I remember developing that and thinking that, like, later, like, people aren't going to read a story or a book by Roddy Bottum. So I remember, like, even going through that process, and like, as a young person and growing up, and I always was sure, like, that's what I would do with my life. I always thought I'd be a writer. And like here I am, I'm 62 years old, and honestly, like I do still consider myself a writer, but I've never written anything other than song lyrics, which is a lot and says something. But I like to think of myself as a storyteller for whatever reason. Like I always in my day to day, I gravitate towards stories. And you bring up sort of the mess and the messiness of my life, and absolutely, my life has been such a crazy mess, and there's been so much wreckage. And amidst the wreckage, also, there's just been a lot of insane stories. Like I'm always like still like Joey and I are driving right now. We're driving all the way across country to Los Angeles from Alabama. And like it's perfect, right time to sort of just talk about stuff. And there's always, like, never a shortage of so many things that I feel like I haven't even told Joey, my boyfriend. He knows like everything about me. And then I'm like, did I ever tell you about like dot, dot, dot? There's so many of those things. And I think I've always been conscious of that, like in my life, like the weird things that I've stumbled onto and the funny, quirky tales and like messy things that have happened to me. Not always pretty things, but, dramatic things. And those things at some point particularly in the cusp of the COVID, when we were all figuring out what to do and how to stay creative and how to keep busy. I was like, okay, I got to start getting these things down on paper. And that's what I kind of started doing. I started just like, it wasn't necessarily a book at first, but it was like a chronicling of things that I didn't want to forget. So I started there.
Well, but you you do mention several times that you're a fast typer, so you obviously do like to write things down.
I do. I'm really fast. Like I think when I was a kid and I took a typing class in high school, like my fingers were very dexterous. Like I played classical piano from a really early age, like since I was 5, and I was really into it. Like I would play the piano 2 hours a day, and my fingers were very fast. And when I learned typing, yeah, I was so good at it. It was this new frontier for me. Like, oh, I can really like crank stuff out in a pretty quick pace.
Yeah, no, I now you make me jealous because I always wanted to learn piano and you make it seem so easy. And I'm really good at typing too. Maybe I should have done piano. I never sat down and did it.
I mean, in a way of reverse of what I was saying, like I'm sure that works. Like your fingers are fast from typing. I'll bet you would be a good piano player, Jerry.
Yeah,
You just have to like, yeah, start it. It's
yeah.
never too late. That stupid adage, it's the truth. It's never too late.
It's because I had a friend who was a classical pianist, and when I told him I wanted to do it, he's like, "Why? You're never going to be great." And
Oh my God. Lose that friend. Who is that?
no, it's fine.
That person is horrible.
I should have been in a punk band or a rock band playing. It would have made me feel better.
Well, even not. Like, I mean, like there's so much like you can achieve in a short amount of time.
So I don't want to derail us. I really want to start. I'm going to take us through some things because I thought you wrote some really beautiful lines and I think they're important for people to know. And one of the things I loved is really right off the bat, you said, or you wrote, I didn't realize what a privilege it was to be gay until so much later. That's a short line, but that's a really important statement.
Yeah, thanks. In my sort of reading stuff and the events that I do, like I read that line a lot. Yeah, I've read it a bunch. And what follows, it kind of goes into a crazy testimonial of being a gay person and where I was growing up and what I became growing into my gayness. But like for sure, like as a kid, like you don't, I mean, it's such a shameful thing, or it was for me in my era to be gay as a kid. So it went from that until like, now I'm, the age that I am and been through what I've been through, like, oh, I'm so lucky. We're so lucky to be gay. Like, what a privilege it is, coming from a place of youth where it's like, oh my God, you'd rather die than admit, like literally, than admit being gay. It's such a journey to come from point A to point Z or whatever.
I also love though that you get so explicit with your horniness and you talk about wanting to have sex with the priest, cruising in the bushes, and that later you're told basically that it's bad and that you were molested and you're like, this is what I wanted. And I remember feeling that way and doing that and going to the bathroom at JC Penney's looking for stuff and wondering, and you talk about that, having that thing, and I feel like so many people try to pathologize it and you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. We grew up, pathologizing. Absolutely. But it's a funny thing, like I say that too in my events when I've been reading. I love to say that part about all I wanted was to be molested by a priest. And it really drops like such a thud. And like us as gay men, like I think like going to Macy's and JC's Penney's and like absolutely that's where I was too. I was at like a department store when I was a kid and like looking for it like a rabid little monkey, and just so horny as a kid. And so many of us as gay men were that way as kids. And part of my process in writing my book was like absolutely no shame, no apologies. I'm just laying it out on the line, like in a way that like straight people have talked about their sort of like coming of age in ways like all their lives and had no shame for it. And I'm kind of like there with my journey. And it's funny, like the difference of acceptance or sort of like the ears that listen to it. Like straight people, I don't know. I think straight people actually are okay with it. I was going to say that straight people have such a hard time listening to that, but maybe it's not true. But I will say, like, it's really easy or was easy to be honest about that action and what I did as a kid with my gay brethren. But like, I had to come clean with like my sisters, my 3 sisters who pretty much know everything about me, and I had to tell them before the book came out, like, by the way, like they didn't know that about me, that I was like, up in the park, like riding my bike up into the Hollywood Hills to have sex with men, older men in bushes and seeking out sex in bathroom stalls and stuff. And I had to come clean with them and tell them about that. Just I wanted them to know before they read the book. But it was a way different sort of like process for them to hear that as straight people as it is for like our gay people to hear it. We kind of like accept it and we know what we do, but like for straight people, it's like, what?
So you hated LA. I know you said you're on your way there and you don't seem to love it still. And you got to San Francisco, your village, and you met this guy, Jim Olson, who becomes your first boyfriend. And, obviously you write about it a lot, but I was looking at a lot of the interviews you've done, and people don't seem to really want to focus on that relationship. And I'm just curious. I mean, you talk about, you said your our sex was secret and incredible, but I was smitten with his intellect. And of course, you then go into his mental illness and your heroin addiction and how the drugs and the secrecy were all connected. Tell me about that. I mean, you have this first boyfriend, you guys are fucking a lot, you guys are having a good time, but there's also all this other stuff. I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, part of that relationship, thanks for bringing that up. You're absolutely right. Like, it's kind of like this weird taboo thing, like people don't really bring up. It was a very messy relationship, and he was a very problematic person. Like, most people didn't like him. He was like kind of abhorred in our community. Like, people like couldn't stand him. He was so obnoxious because he was really, really smart. He was kind of like Courtney in a way. He was so loud and abrasive and forthright in what he believed in, and he knew so much. But I kind of like deal with this in the book, but I realized looking back on it, oh, there was a lot of mental illness there. And when I kind of was like thinking about like what happened to him, like in the aftermath, like I reached out to my friend Matthew. I was like, "What happened to Jim Olson?" Like I knew he had passed away, but I didn't really know how. And he said, "Well, I talked to his brother, and he was like, yeah, well, as a schizophrenic, Jim was." And I was like, "Wait, what?" A schizophrenic. And I didn't like really like as a kid, like being drawn to something like that and a person like that. I didn't clock that there was any mental illness. It was just something eccentric and exciting to me about him. And that's what I was really drawn to. And the relationship was that, but then also shrouded in this crazy secrecy. Like we weren't really open about what we did and we were fucking behind closed doors and people didn't know, whether we were a couple or not. And it was sort of vague, and even he went on our first tour with us in Faith No More, and like the band didn't even know we were a couple, which was crazy. And we were traveling around in this '66 Dodge, and that had a camper shell on the back. And Jim and I would sleep in the back of the Dodge every night and fuck. And kind of like it wasn't a known thing, even in the band. It was that secret of a relationship was which is wild. But then eventually the relationship kind of devolved into insane drug addiction, and were both heroin addicts. But for the most, the relationship was regarded by all our friends as just like, what are you doing with this person? Sort of that vibe. And I've kind of like, there's always been people like that in my life, like extreme people, people with mental health issues who I just kind of champion and am on board with. But I mean, sort of the upside of that relationship, or one of the upsides of it too, like he was such a genius. And as we were kids, and this comes up in the book, and I made my first sort of like little amount of money with Faith No More, which was like we made $12,000 one year after the end of like a whole year plus of touring. And Jim, he was so smart. He had taught me about the stock market for some reason. And just to put into context, we were like dreadlocked kids, bicycle messengers, smoking pot every day, stealing things, crazy artists. And he was teaching me about the stock market. Like, I don't even know why that came into our world, but it did. And it just felt extreme and sort of almost performative, like, oh yeah, we knew about the stock market. But anyway, I took that $12,000 at the insistence of Jim Olson and bought Apple stock with it in like 1986 or something. And I still have that stock, so do the math. And that's kind of a testament to like, okay, yeah, I made some crazy decisions, but honestly, no regrets.
Well, and just to give it more context, people need to know it wasn't easy to figure out how to buy stock when you were what you were saying. Like it wasn't like an app you put on your phone. Like you had to, how do I do this? Like this is a whole, like and it wasn't. normalized.
Yeah, it was a Charles Schwab account. There were telephone calls made. I mean, we did it, and I bought stock, and like, yeah, it kind of made me, quite frankly, and not to brag, but I'm a millionaire, and because of that. And it's a weird thing to bring up, and I bring it up in the book, and people kind of like question me at the time, like even my publisher was like, "Are you sure you want to divulge that?" And I feel good divulging it because it's kind of like winning the lottery, and so happenstance and accidental and a crazy one of those crazy things that happened in my life that I'm just kind of like fine being open with.
You write really elegantly though about this idea of love and how love happens. It's almost like a Rihanna song, and love happens in a crazy place or in a bad place. And
Hmm.
as you say, in prison there is love, in the classroom, in the workplace. It happens where it's not allowed and it happens where it's encouraged. Jim and I were in love in the throes of growing up in a secret place where no one knew that it was. That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
It seems like you were trying to process, because I think sometimes people say, "Well, is that love? What is love?" And I wonder what it means to you when you say love in that context.
Right. Yeah, it's complicated. Like at that age too, we are so horny, and it's such a sexual thing. And I was like, more than anything, I just like at that age, I just wanted to have sex. But that does transcend into more than that for sure. And it is a confusing thing when I look back on it. Like I know I was like physically just acting out in a way that like I just wanted to have sex. But there was a regularity and a specialness to like that particular relationship and to the insanity of what that person was and the drama that it brought to my life. It kind of did form my opinion of what love is or was. And in that context, it was, yeah, love to me, and kind of maybe still is a lot of drama. And I've had to sort of readjust my take on, what love is in today's world, like in my relationship now. Like, does it have to be these crazy peaks and these, screaming matches and differences and ups and downs? Like, I've had to sort of adjust, from an early age of like what it was to me then and what it is to me now.
And part of that is, not having examples, not having role models. One of the reasons why I created the Queer Love Project, right, is that I think people just, even though we say, "Oh, we won, like we can get married," like people still don't have these role models. They don't have these stories or see that how other people, as you said, our gay brethren, how they made it work or how they didn't make it work. And so in a way, this gives another example to other people who read it of saying, "Okay, he did it this way. I don't have to do it that way, but it can be done." Right? I know that Patty Schimmel of Hull is one of your friends now, and she's one of the few queer people in rock that you know of or had in your life. But tell me about that, about feeling like, knowing that Elton John's gay but he won't say it, knowing that Freddie Mercury's gay but he won't say it, all these things. Did you care? Did it matter having no role models?
It mattered so much, but at the same time, I was kind of just like trying to shut out the horror of that when I was a kid. Like it was such a black hole. It was something that I think kids need. You need someone or some success story or something like at the end of the rainbow, so to speak, that sort of like points you in a direction of like, this is going to work. It's going to be okay. Because like as kids, like nothing seems like it's going to be okay. And it just seems futile. And even though like I was in a band and we were getting popular and stuff, everything just felt like it wasn't going to work out. And particularly being a gay person in the world of like doing what I was doing, the only sort of like representation I had were these horrible sort of like presentations of like sitcoms or like, I always talk about like Paul Lynde and Bewitched. It was just like everything was just a joke, and the gay representation in my world was just a joke that was kind of offensive and just like I never related to. And it was a lonely place to be, like knowing that like it was just like my sort of I succumbed to the fact that okay, well, I guess that's what I'm gonna have to be to like not even to succeed, but just to like get through life and to be like a gay person. That's what it meant. And it took a long time to sort of realize that there were other sort of like opportunities or routes for me to go. And Patty was such a a wonderment to me, like as a kid, because like we were saying, like all those people, yeah, were in the closet. Like Freddie Mercury wasn't open, and Elton John had like lied about what,
Yeah.
he was and his sexuality. And more contemporary people, yeah, like Michael Stipe and Bob Mould, like it wasn't really out there for me, and there was no direction at all. But Patty was someone that was bold and badass and a dyke and like comfortable with her queerness when I was sort of coming out, and she was a really great ally at the time that we met and still is. She's such a rad person, but it was really few and far between and a lonely place to be.
I mentioned the whole Kurt Cobain of it all earlier because, yeah, I remember people asking Michael Stipe, and I was living, as I said, at a military base in Okinawa, Japan, and so my lifeline was either bootleg VHS of MTV that people would bring over for us, or I had Rolling Stone and Spin, and I remember Michael not really talking about it, but then I've come to understand that he basically, I think, is queer, and he didn't really have the words for what he was at the time. He didn't like the gay thing either. It was more like another thing that he felt he was. But I remember Kurt saying he was bisexual, and then suddenly it became cool in my school to be bisexual. And when I told people I was gay, they were like, "Boy, you're bisexual," and everybody wanted to be bisexual all of a sudden. And this must have been like 91. And then when you said you were gay, they were like, "Oh, that's not cool. Like Kurt's bisexual," that sort of thing. And you have these really great moments with him. We're going to talk about Courtney, of course, because I'm so obsessed with her, and your stories with her are pretty fucking amazing. But you have these moments with Kurt, and you mentioned that he wanted to be gay and thought you were cool for being gay, and I was just curious about that. Like, did you have this conversation, or was it just a feeling you had?
I think he was pretty open about it. Like he was so appreciative, like when I came out and made that statement. And I remember like I think I maybe mentioned him in that article too, and he was so happy to be included, but he was like, super proud and kind of like saying he was bisexual. But I remember calling him out on it and being like, "Well, I mean, are the most like publicly married person on the planet right now." Because the Kurt and Courtney was such a thing at the moment, and I was like, it's kind of easy for you to say you're gay or bisexual when you're like, so married. But at the same time, like, yeah, he was such a hero in that way. Like just his, lyrics, God is gay. Everything that he said and sort of his direction that he went and his appreciation of the spirit of queerness was, yeah, was kind of unrivaled at the time.
But you were so enmeshed in this toxic masculinity. I mean, I was sort of fascinated by some of these bands, including yours, but I was also scared as hell because I thought these are the people that would beat me up. And yet you were in the middle of it all. Like, I don't understand how, you're on tour with Guns N' Roses and dealing with all of that. And you just dealt with it. Like I ran away from it. You kind of seemed like you ran toward it. Maybe it's part of the drama.
I don't think I was running towards it. It just was all that existed at the time. I mean, being in a band meant that. It meant sort of like this man thing. And not only was I gay, but just the instrument that I played to was super fey. Like to be in that realm of like a hard rock sort of loud, like what it was, like the loudness of guitar rock, and to be the keyboard player. Like even if I hadn't have been gay, that was already a challenge. Because it's sort of like keyboards are like kind of just by nature not cool. And so there was that, and sort of coupled with the fact that I was gay, it was a very alone place to be in that spectrum of like man rock for sure. It wasn't as like intense as it got, once we started like playing with bigger bands like, Guns N' Roses and Metallica, it was really like me in my role was really so much a contrarian. Initially, though, when we were just in the freak out sort of like club scene of San Francisco, it was kind of a little bit more like anything goes. Not a whole lot more, but there was more sort of like wiggle room. But as we got sort of pigeonholed as a, kind of rock band, it really was like a lonely place to be the only gay sort of like identity in that mix.
You seem though that you would have been in a New Romantics band if you had the chance. You seem to I don't know. I like how you write about that. I have to say also I felt like an idiot. I never understood that Black Flag was, you know, meant to kill like Adam Ant kind of thing. Like I never thought about
Right.
that. You put that in the and I was like, "Oh right, it is a pesticide. Like it is meant to kill bugs, isn't it?" Like anyway, so I didn't realize the aggression that was there.
The aggression was there. I don't think it actually came from the band, but like their minions and the people that were Black Flag, the people that were the Circle Jerks, the people that were Fear, there were definitely like homophobic sort of realms in that world, which is odd. You know, you don't see that coming. It's this like this genre of music that's very progressive, and really like forward thinking, and all of a sudden like add that to the mix, like there's homophobic tendencies there. Like the mosh pit was a scary place, like queer kids weren't allowed in the mosh pit. I mean, though you sort of look at it as like, oh yeah, it's like that's liberation and that's free spirited and that's like progressive thinking. It kind of wasn't.
There was a homosocial aspect to it. I remember being so attracted to all the skater boys, but also feeling like they were going to kick my ass. So I always wanted to go be a headbanger with them, but I thought I would get killed. So I was always on the outside because I could tell they knew that I was different from them, and I always hung out with the girls. So anyway,
That makes sense, though. That makes sense to be drawn to something like that. The danger of it and like the potential of like fitting in. And there was a risk involved. You could get hurt. And there's something like sexy about that, right?
yeah. So let's talk about Hurricane Courtney because I've only met her once and been in her presence where I was just enthralled for like 3 hours where she just pontificated and told stories and you didn't know if they were real. And you kind of capture that in this really great way. And your relationship has been so intense with her. I didn't know that you had a sexual relationship with her. You'd had a lot of different ups and downs. And that was a sort of epiphany. Why do you think? I mean, you've mentioned this being attracted to the drama and the intensity, but there's something about her in particular that just, especially gay men, we are just like we want to have the Courtney in our life.
Yeah, she's so exciting. She's opinionated. She's a very strong woman. She's hilarious. She's really smart. She doesn't take shit from anyone. She stands up. She's provocative. She's so undeniably like attractive. She's beautiful. I mean, she has all the ingredients and she's messy as hell. She's so, so messy. I think that's what sort of like I got on board with initially is like she's so messy and there's so many flaws and so much room for just like wreckage and humor and honesty, that she just owns and doesn't apologize for. That's what it comes down to a lot to me is like she's so unapologetic, in her sort of like trajectory and who she is and what she stands for. As queer men, for sure, we get on board with that big time.
And she also, I mean, it goes to show she supports the book, even though you don't paint her in a pretty light all the time. She is endorsing the book and loves the book.
She loves the book, but honestly, in my mind, like I pretty much I feel like I painted her in a really pretty noble light. In terms of, I mean, if you read about Courtney, it's a crazy sort of like zone to go into. Like if I post a picture of myself with Courtney or if I talk about her, like the comments that come at me are so intense. It's so misogynistic and it's so angry and so mean and doesn't always come from men. It comes from women too. And it's like, I mean, just down to the very core of it, like Courtney killed Kurt. Like that. Like, what the fuck? It's so mean. Like, people just can't stand her. And I was very aware of that. I'm aware of sort of that attitude and that sentiment out there. So in writing what I write and what I wrote and sharing my stories of me and Courtney, I knew it had to be like it is honest, but I knew I had to lead with a sense of like this person is a hero. She's a hero. She's like magic and she's like one of a kind and she's special and she's like, a voice of a generation and so sweet. I felt like in my writing I kind of overdid it in terms of like painting her so prettily.
That's good. I mean, you are protective of her, which I think is also noble. And you talk about your loyalties.
I feel that. I feel very protective of her, and like across the board, like I've always kind of been that way with her. But like it's a special person that can get on board. Like my dad loved Courtney. He thought she was just like amazing. That kind of says a lot. Like, my mom maybe not so much, but my dad was a real fan of Courtney. And I remember like talking about that, like even at his funeral. I don't think I said her name, but I was like, my dad was really on board with like real outsider people and people who like, were challenging. And that was like the spirit of my dad that I love so much. But he was such a fan of hers, and that always kind of said a lot to me.
Well, I want to move on from this because I have a lot more I want to ask you. But before I do want to ask about the goodbye kiss with Kurt because he had a really great line, and I'm going to let you say it if you remember. I'm sure you've told this story.
I haven't so much, but like I don't know, yeah, I mean just for the listeners, we were really close, and they were going through Courtney and Kurt we'd all kind of been in the throes of heroin addiction. And I got clean without the two of them, and Courtney reached out like they were still going through it, and she said, "Come to Seattle, Kurt's going through a really hard time." And I was kind of recently clean, and it's insane that I would do that, but I did. I went up to Seattle and sort of spent like maybe some days or a week with them, and was trying to just kind of be like this sober presence in both of their lives that could maybe serve as some sort of like suggestion of what the possibilities of life could be like without drugs. And it was a really complicated and weird place to be. It felt mildly sycophantic, like I was there and sort of like, I don't know, it was just a crazy time. They by that time were so famous, and it was just a kind of awkward, but kind of also noble. Like I was in a way trying to help and trying to be a person that could help in the position of getting clean. And then when I was leaving, I remember like they were still just doing dope, and I was leaving, and I remember Kurt was doing dope in the bathroom, and I went to say goodbye, and he like literally had the spoon, and he was like spilling the dope or not spilling the dope, and like pulling the syringe up, and he stopped, and like I go, I gotta go. And he's like, oh, you gotta go. And then like he kissed me, and he goes, you kissed me like a man, boy. And I laughed, and then I left.
And you've never used that line in anybody else, hopefully.
Oh, well, I used it in an Imperial Teen song, which is sort of like
Oh,
in I guess it's yeah, Year One. It's sort of like a lot about Kurt in that time in my life. And it comes up in the sort of bridge of that song, You Kiss Me Like a Man, Boy.
oh yeah. There you go. I'm glad you reminded me. So let's talk about Angel Dust, and let's talk about as I mentioned at the beginning, your gay song, and having Mike Patton sing about blowjobs. And you said that it wasn't a hit, but I think people remember it and being aggressive.
I think people remember it for the outlandishness that it was, that song. It's really ridiculous. And why I chose to write those words and why I chose to sort of make Mike sing them is like, I don't know why. I was really acting out in a way. And I think that was actually before I like even had sort of like declared being gay in the press. So it was really like, yeah, it was outlandish of me to do that. But I had written songs before, and sort of the band kind of let me do that. And I think Mike, like, I think at the time it was about like Mike Patton had joined the band, and he sort of had a reputation and a real vision of the band for himself as being like a different character in every song he would do, sort of, which was kind of for me was the antithesis of like a heartfelt delivery. He was always like kind of playing these roles in different songs. Like he would be an old man in one song, he would be a baby in one song, he would be like a country western trashy person in another song. And I was like, well, here's one for you.
You're going to be a sub.
How about being like a cocksucker? Try that one on. So it was really bratty and sort of outlandish of me, but sort of that's what I did. And kudos to him, for putting on those shoes and jumping right in. He didn't have any qualms about it. And that was cool.
And you taught many kids how to spell aggressive.
For sure.
I was reading some of the YouTube comments and realizing, yeah, there's all these people are like, I had no idea when I was whatever that what I was singing, and now they realize it. So you did subvert a generation of straight boys.
Fantastic.
So I want to fast forward. I know that we've been talking a lot about the book and about those stories, but you've done so much more, and obviously the book is capturing a certain time period. But you are now making music with your partner, with your boyfriend. You started doing that during the pandemic. Have some amazing songs and very provocative videos. What has that been like doing it in this context?
It's really intense. Like when we started our band Man on Man, we were in a very dark place. COVID was happening, and Joey's mom had just passed away, and we were kind of like a new couple. And though we were both musicians, we'd never made music together. And it was sort of this uncharted territory for both of us. I'd kind of like leaned into the sort of the sincerity of like starting a band with family members, sort of. Because Imperial Team was kind of that to me, was like close people, like my close people. And it just felt like a really good place to a springboard to start from in terms of like we were so close and we got along so well, we knew each other so well, and we were comfortable with each other and loved each other. And that felt like a good direction, like being with family, sort of, and coming from that place in terms of songwriting and voice. And cut to like Joey and I, I mean, we're falling in love, and we started to write songs like basically just about us, to each other, and about our relationship was sort of a hyper extension of that sort of like that concept. Like we weren't only family members, but we were, boyfriends and loved each other and starting a life together. And then add to that like the darkness of where we were coming from, which was COVID, and like everyone around us was dying, and it was a scary time and a vulnerable time. To me, it felt kind of remarkable. Like I'd never seen that done before. I've never seen like, a couple write in that way. And also the added element of two gay men singing in that way, I definitely never seen before. So it hit the mark in a lot of different ways for me in terms of like Mm, the craft that we were doing, it was like really different and really fresh and original and heartfelt.
And on top of that, you guys showed your bodies and you performed in underwear, and that got a lot of attention. I have to say, I even got pushback from people, and I didn't think of it as explicit, and people thought this was somehow, having guys kissing and having you in your underwear. And I was thinking, well, we had Red Hot Chili Peppers in their socks on, like why is this somehow more of an issue because these guys are hairy and big and gay? Were you surprised?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we kind of did it in a naive sort of like put it up on the internet kind of way when we made that video. And it wasn't until I think like there was like an English website and sort of it got attention because Roddy from Faith No More was like involved, and it was like we'd been quiet for a while, and all of a sudden it was like, have you seen this guy's new project? And like reading what a bunch of straight people would sort of like get from that video, their comments was like, wow, over the top. Like on so many different levels of like one was kind of disgust for what we were showing, like us in our underwear and kissing. Like there was a real homophobic like edge to it for sure. But then also like even the people that kind of like the straight people that could get on board with it, because like undeniably that song is like a banger. You know what I mean? Like you can't deny that. That song is like incredible. It's like in the spectrum of songs and pop songs, I love that song. It's so great. The chorus is so good, and it's such a great sort of exploration. It goes to a beautiful place. I love it as a song, and you can't deny that. But I think people getting on board, even when they did, particularly straight people, was like, "Oh, it's so funny," and it's like, "Funny." We weren't like it's a love song, and it's really sincere, and it's us just like putting our hearts on our sleeves, like absolutely, like as intensely as anyone could. And it's just like sort of this history of the world that makes gay men into some joke, some jester, some clown. And I was like, no, this isn't funny. So in that way, it sort of like opened my eyes and opened Joey's eyes to like, what? Like this is the way we're being seen, and it really was disturbing, honestly, in that way. And then coupled with the fact that like YouTube took the video down, and you were very much there, Jerry, in the midst of that, sort of like seeing that going down, and you wrote about it. But like that was it was a really disheartening moment for a sec there. We were being so vulnerable and so open about this like relationship that was new and exciting and fresh, and kind of like singing about it in a groundbreaking way. And the initial sort of impact that hit us was like, oh, these guys are so funny.
I mean, are you surprised now? I mean, now that you've been going on this book tour and so many of your fans of various projects have been coming out to meet you, and they're hopefully accepting, or they're somehow open-minded. Have you had any weird experiences in that way?
Not at all. Like everyone is so supportive. The events have just been insanely powerful and empowering and feel so good. Not only for me, but it feels like a time in which, just with the country where we are as a people and being sort of in need of queer voices and sort of like rational thought in terms of like MAGA screaming, people really want to like be heard and listen to voices that are compassionate and encouraging and sort of community driven, amongst our community. And it feels like that, like across the board. Like there's only been support out there, and it's so sweet. Like people who come to the events have really just been like everything. It's really been a special time. These past couple of weeks have been so special. It's really a unique sort of opportunity that I've had with this book. The aftermath of it, I didn't really see coming, but it really is a bonding sort of sensation.
So I like to ask people, and I didn't prepare you for this, so hopefully I'm not going to shock you, but do you have any advice for people who, when, maybe they read this book, young kids, queer kids, and they're like, how do I find love? Because I do see that they're still struggling, right? They have the apps, they have all these other options. People are talking about going cruising now, like analog cruising. What do you think that people should keep in mind when they're trying to figure all this out in this crazy time?
I mean, good question. And I would think I would have an answer, but I don't. I don't know. I like the fact that, like, I mean, it strikes me like interesting and intriguing and kind of cool that someone could read my book and like get something from it. As particularly kids, I think really what I learned as a kid was like I really learned a lot from my elders or like just looking at the history and sort of like following that and finding a course for myself, like is a lot based in like what people had done before me. That feels important.
Roddy, you're an elder now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge it to the fact that, like, the extent of like, I often like think about like, is this pertinent for kids to read? But I mean, part of my writing the book was I wanted to write about San Francisco in a preservational way that could sort of like put it out there as an example of a lifestyle that worked and turned into something good. And in that way, I just really hope that like young kids can sort of relate to the stories because it is like, I mean, there's a datedness to what I write for sure, and an ideology that doesn't really exist as much anymore. And I think kids come out of the closet a lot easier and a lot earlier and sort of a lot more in a more compassionate way than I was able to. So already kids have sort of a heads up and a head start to sort of their lives in a way. But I just always like, yeah, I kind of really get a lot out of sort of like dealing with history and what men before me or what women and queerness before me has been. I think that helped me as a kid. And I don't know, maybe that helps kids now.
Yeah, and I think your example of talking about your chosen family, your found family is also important so that people know that it's obviously you have a close relationship with your biological family as well, but it's not just that.
I think for sure, yeah. I mean, that's what I come away from this whole process of writing to, and when I was talking about like these events that have been happening, there's a real sense of community that always is there for me, I feel. And it's like it's right outside. Like it's kind of corny to say, but that community is right there. It's on your phone, I guess. It's there if you want to reach that direction. But like it's right outside, and it's real and it's visceral and it's like in the flesh. And I think, I mean, we all know for kids specifically today, like a lot of what's absorbed is through the telephone, but there's so much that's out there like happening outside in the world. That's such an old person thing to say, but it's so true. Like, God damn it, put down the fucking phone, you know?
Thank you for saying it because I was about to say it as well. I keep telling people, including my peers and older, like if you think it's so bad, get off your phone, go to a rock show, go to a play, go out into the world, and you'll realize it's not as bad as you think.
It's always a good decision to go outside and be with people, even as like challenging as that is. And that's sort of these events that have been happening, like the book events that I've been doing. It's been all about that. It's like, oh my God, I always say every sort of event, I'm like, thank you people so much for just showing up, for being here physically, for like speaking and listening and like being in the flesh. It's such a difference.
Well, Roddy, I want to thank you for taking time on your countrywide trek to talk to us, and you guys have a safe drive to Los Angeles. And I think that it's been amazing. Thank you for so much for sharing all this.
Thank you, Jerry. It's always good conversation with you. I appreciate it so much. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
And we'll hopefully be hearing more music from you guys soon.
Absolutely, very soon.
And if you're a new listener to the Queer Love podcast and aren't already a subscriber to the Queer Love Project, you can find us on Substack. It's a platform where LGBTQ plus people can share stories and experiences about whatever love means to them. We keep all our words free and publish original personal essays and interviews every week. So go to queerloveproject.substack.com and subscribe and support us today.